Awesome. So, welcome everybody to this week's CanJS Community Hangout. We got a really cool topic this week, which is going to be showing how to build native applications with CanJS. When we say native applications, we're talking about like iPhone and Android native applications that you could download from an app store, or like a Windows or OS X executable application. And the obvious benefit to building an application with CanJS in this way is you have one single code base that you can use for all of your devices. So there's a lot of power there. Presenting first is going to be Josh Dean. He's going to show us how to use node-webkit to build OS X and Windows applications. Yeah, go ahead and say hi, Josh.
Hello, Josh.
Thank you. And next is Andy, and he's going to walk us through how he's building an Android application. So, go ahead and say hi, Andy.
Hey, I'm Andy. I work at Bitovi with a lot of these folks. It's a fun place.
And then on top of that, we have Matthew, David, and Justin, who are just going to basically be here to add some conversation, ask some good questions, and hopefully get you guys all the answers you want. So, without further ado, I'm going to hand it off to Josh.
Cool, thank you. I feel bad I didn't actually say everything that Andy did. I also work with all of these guys at Bitovi. I didn't go too into detail there. So before Andy covers the mobile sphere, I'm going to talk a little bit about basically easy ways to develop native applications with the web and also with CanJS. The easiest way that I found in my time doing it, because there's a couple of different options. There's a library out there called node-webkit, which is basically a application framework that basically turns a browser into an application. That browser being Chromium, and then on top of that, as the name implies, provides Node.js to you in order to interact with the operating system directly. And the big thing to do with that primarily is file I/O, which is kind of what I will go ahead and show you today. So there are really a few simple things that are needed in order to do a node-webkit application. First of all, you need to just install node-webkit, and then you just need to have your normal sort of stack. So here, I took the require version of CanJS's to-do MVC, and I stuck it in the folder. The only thing you need on top of that is a package.json file. This package.json file is what node-webkit will use to basically initiate the app itself. So here we give the app a name, to do MVC. And we also identify what the primary HTML file we want to run is. In this case, just index.html. Then on top of that, we can provide some information about the window. Here we provide the height, the width, whether or not we want to show this application to the taskbar, and then where in the window, the actual window itself, where we want the application to be placed, in this case, center. There's a whole slew of other ones we can do. We can choose max heights, mid heights, and widths as well. But for the primary purpose of just showing something now, we'll just do something that's 750 by 550. So if you have node-webkit installed, the only thing you really need to do is go to that folder where your package.json file is, and then do nw, which is for node-webkit, and then .period to signify you want to load it up here.
Josh, can you blow your terminal up?
Yes, I can. Boom. How's that?
Thank you.
And then it goes ahead and starts node-webkit. And here we have CanJS with require.js and to-do MVC. If you are using require.js, there are a few hangups because since this is node-webkit and it provides the whole slew of Node.js to you, Node.js has a require function globally. So in order to use that, we need to, before we load require.js, we need to reassociate where that variable will be before require.js runs. And in this case, as you can see here at the bottom of our index.html, we basically just say we're going to have window.require point be require node instead. That way we can still use Node.js's require on top of require.js's require. So here we have just our normal app. Pretty much everything you've expected from to-do MVC. It slices, it dices, everything that you need in your static to-do MVC. But what we're going to do real quick is I'm going to show you basically taking these to-dos that we might have, say shopping, cleaning, and partying. And what I'll show you is how ridiculously simple it is now to add some saving and loading from static files through Node.js rather than doing, say, jQuery.ajax or getJSON. So at the bottom of our to-do app component, we added two buttons, load from file and save all to file. And we're going to, on can-click, run load from file and then save to file respectively. These functions, we have already created in our scope for the to-do app tag. The only thing we need to do is add the required Node.js functions. So in order to do file I/O in Node.js, we use the FS library, which is, since we switched it from require to require node, we would do require node.
Maybe I missed it. Why are you changing it to require node instead of just using require?
Because we are using the version of the to-do app MVC require.js. Yeah. Otherwise, what will happen is if we didn't do this, in fact, I'll take it out to go ahead and show you. What will happen is it will run into, it will basically run into an overlap when it's running or starting up the app and kind of freak out on you, because when it starts up, it looks for that require. So we have to go ahead and put in this sort of check. Now, if you're using Steel, you don't need to do this. But since I wanted to quick grab something that was existing and then add on to it, the require to-do MVC kind of fit the bill. Anyway, so what we'll do is we'll just take whatever to-dos we have and we'll basically stringify it, since we kind of want to save it to a file. So we'll grab our to-dos, we'll set it to variable to-dos, and we'll do a json.stringify. And since on our scope it is to-dos, we just have to do this. And of course, to get the object representation, we just do .adder of that with no variables passed in. At this point, we need to create a write stream, which is how in Node.js we would write to a file. We'll call it wstream, and to call that, it would be fs create I want to say create writes. And just for sanity's sake, we'll save it to the root folder here, and we'll do saved to-dos.json. Just to be safe, we'll provide a flag of W, which means we want to make this file writable. I believe in Node.js it's by default, but better safe than sorry. Then all we need to do is do wstream.write to-dos, since it's a string, and then we need to close the stream. And we do that by calling end. So now if we were to go back to our index and we clicked save all to file, object has nothing called create write stream. Maybe that's because I typed Steam. Should be create write stream. Typos are fun. There we go, try it again. Click save all to file. And if we were to go look at our save to-dos.json, we would see our JSON file. It's got shopping, cleaning, partying. So let's go ahead and just delete these real quick. And then what we'll do is we'll go ahead and we'll do the load from file to kind of bring them back. So we still need to, again, use the FS library. And we want to do, actually, fs.readFile. That would still be saved to-dos.json. And we want to read it as UTF-8. Then in our callback, we get error, which is a flag to say whether or not it errored out, and then the data itself. We'll do a real quick. If an error happens, we'll just allow. Otherwise, what we'll do is we'll JSON.parse. What we probably want to do is we want to do this.adder. Data. Of course, this won't work because we're inside another function. So real quick and easy way we can do this is just by doing var self equals this, and then switching this to self. Alternatively, we could do can.proxy. So let's go ahead and run this real quick and see if we can't load up the files, or load up the file into here. Awesome. So what it did was it got the save to-dos from the file, loaded them up, we parsed the JSON, and then threw them back in our to-dos. And to kind of show that this does work, and I'm not like throwing any tricks out, we can go ahead and change this here to say studying. And then do load from file again, and then we would see it's different. So this is only kind of like a taste of what you can do. If you're familiar with Node.js and work with Node.js consistently, you're probably you're probably well aware of all the different things you can possibly do. Node-webkit also provides ways for you to modify actual GUI that would be in an application, such as application trays, menu bars, dealing with things like clipboard support, and what have you. It's very robust. I would not say quite as robust as, say, Phonegap, which is used on the mobile platform, but Phonegap has had a lot more time to be developed for. However, node-webkit, it has a very active user base, and it is doing nothing but getting more expansive. And that right there, unless you guys got some questions for me, is node-webkit in a nutshell.
I have one question, Josh. Just maybe a dumb question. Just curious. I know you used require there. You said you could use still or whatever you want to use. But do you in your project? Do you also do production builds, or is there not really a need for it?
Yes, there is a need for it because,
Really?
well, I mean, there is and there isn't. Your standard desktop developer will tell you file I/O is always a choke point. You can choose not to do production builds, but what will happen is you'll end up having to read all of those files, which is slow. File I/O is slow. If you do a production build, you reduce the amount of file I/O you have to do to about 2 files, your CSS file and your production file. There are some issues with it that I found in my use when doing builds. You need to provide kind of skeleton structure for require, for the Node.js require when you're doing, say, a steel build. Otherwise, it will reach that point in the code and it will yell at you for it not existing.
Oh, okay.
So, like in your example, you've got it. You're showing us kind of, the tools that can be used in the browser. But like, what's required to take it and actually make an actual application from it?
In terms of what? Because that can mean a lot of things.
In terms of like, being displayed as more of like an executable, not so much like inside of a browser as a web page.
There's a lot of ways to do that. It's really, in order to actually do like a build, basically what you do is you take a copy of node-webkit. At least this is in Mac. In Windows, it's a little bit more complicated, and I'm not 100% certain for it. But you take a copy of node-webkit, you open up the package contents, and you drop all of your files into the contents folder. And then the next time you were to open up that instance of node-webkit, it would open up with your code. Now, thankfully, because it's the world we live in, there's a grunt task for that. There's something called, I think it's grunt contrib node-webkit. I don't remember off the top of my head. That all you need to do is say what version of node-webkit you want to use and what files you want to give it, and it will build it for you. Of course, there are also answer your question, there are a couple of things that you can pass into your package.json file to remove the frame and to remove the toolbar. In fact, they are very much just frame and toolbar. Let me go ahead and show my screen again real quick, and I can show you what that ultimately looks like. So what I did real quick was I added frame equals false and toolbar equals false. What this will do is it will remove the overall frame around it and the toolbars as well. So now if we were to go ahead and reopen the application, you can see where we now no longer have a frame and we no longer have a toolbar. Some of the downsides of this are you're going to need to build your own kind of custom toolbar in order to do kind of dragging of the application and then using the WebKit user drag CSS property. Then you're also going to want to use some of node-webkit's proprietary libraries, such as, like I mentioned before, with like the custom core GUI stuff, to actually do things like minimize and close windows.
Awesome. Josh, is this the same thing that GitHub's text editor? I can't remember the name of it. Is this what they use as well?
I Don't know. Actually, I think they do something completely separate. I suppose I can check, but I don't have an answer.
Did you look into any? There's a couple alternatives. Like Chrome has their own apps, which you can do
Yeah.
similar stuff with. Did you all look into that at all?
Yeah, that's. I think it's called embedded Chromium or embedded Chromium frame, which is very similar to this, except you lose additional robustness of being able to use Node.js rather than say C++. The real benefit you get from using node-webkit is, as a front-end developer, your sword and shield is CSS and JavaScript. You can use JavaScript continuously for sort of back-endy things as well.
So Matthew, to answer your questions, Atom is using Atom Shell. I think it's based on Chromium too, but it's not based on node-webkit.
Okay.
They open sourced it. It's kind of their own. Yeah.
Cool. Any other questions
Any
for
other
Josh,
questions?
or we're gonna let him be free for the day?
Fly away.
Look, I'm not trying to be crabby or anything. I'm glad I was able to help. I don't know why that's funny.
Okay. Andy, where's your hat?
Take care.
Yeah, I thought about it after Josh's morning, but decided against it. Hopefully everyone can hear me all right. My computer's fan is on full blast, so hopefully that's not interfering with the microphone.
There's a little static, but it's weird.
Okay. So basically what I'm going to be going over is sort of like how to build a native mobile application using CanJS. It actually has a lot in common with the stuff that Josh went through, which is the platform I ended up going with also embeds Chromium. This is targeted at Android specifically, and one of the reasons that's nice is if you're not familiar, every version of Android before like 4.4 doesn't use the latest version of Chrome in its web views, so it's like this like really, really old version of the browser that doesn't support a whole lot and it's really slow. So that's one of the benefits to this versus just like a regular app. So I'm going to start a screen share. So to start off, I'm just going to sort of show the app that I've been building. So this is what it looks like in my kitchen. Basically, I've been working on an app where for my fiance and I, it displays both our calendars, it displays the weather. There's also this little dust thing here that displays the pollen forecast, which is nice for my fiance because she has allergy issues. But along with that, we also have all these to-dos that is actually synced with the app called Wunderlist. Technically, they don't have an official API available for use, but there's an unofficial one that you can sort of tap into, although I wouldn't do anything commercial with it. This is a better screenshot of what it actually looks like. And then let's do a quick demo of it.
So is that like a tablet you just have hanging on the wall?
Yeah,
or what is
so this is actually, well, I could probably stare into the reflection now. So it's it's essentially a giant Android tablet. It's actually made by Lenovo. It's an Android all-in-one. It's a 19.5-inch monitor. And one of the nice things about it is it has like a battery in it, so like I can bring it around everywhere. Like it's not plugged in right now. So it's really handy. We actually have it on an extendable arm on the wall so that we can like put recipes on it and load it up when we're cooking and stuff too.
Since Andy told me he was going to do this presentation, I showed this to my wife, and she's just been begging me to get something like this set up ever since. She's like, when is he going to make this thing? I want it.
Yeah,
source that?
I haven't decided my intentions yet. Like when I was initially designing this, I was planning on turning it into a commercial project. That might be a long time down the road, so I might just open source it instead. I haven't really decided yet. But if you see up here, like there's the weather and stuff, and all this is populated with live data all the time. The calendars are actually populated with the built-in calendars on the Android device. So I can like scroll throughout the week if you want to. There's also the to-dos here, and you can have multiple pages of that too. But you can also check stuff off, and that'll sync with all the other devices as well. So that's pretty much that. All right, just to sort of go through the basics of how to set up an Android project. There's sort of like three different ways you can really do it. I'd say the easiest one is this. Intel has something called the XDK. It's basically this app where you can import whatever project you want. You could test it directly in this app, but one of the nice things about it is you can just write a simple web application, create a project on Intel stuff, and push the files to their test server. And what they have is, like on the App Store for Android and iOS, they have this thing called Intel App Preview. So you can actually load it on your device and do rapid prototyping and development, where like the App Preview device just loads all your assets from your desktop. So, and then you can also use Chrome debugging to actually debug from your desktop as well. And it makes the whole thing really painless. And I mean, it's generally like all one-click, and supports like all the platforms. It's actually powered by Cordova under the covers. And for those that aren't aware, Cordova is the new open source name since it got transferred to Apache for Phonegap. So it's the exact same code base, it's just renamed. But one of the nice things about this is it has built-in builds for whatever platform you want. And the key one here, considering this is the Android app, is Crosswalk for Android, which I'll go over in a second. One of the downsides to XDK is that, well, it's very simple to use, and it's based on Cordova. The Cordova API is actually not exposed, so you can't use any Cordova plugins with it right now. It is planned for a future release of the XDK. So if you want to get, go ahead.
So you can't do file I/O with it then?
They do have Intel has their own built-in APIs for that, and any of the default modules for Cordova you can actually get access to if you do one of these Cordova builds. But like as far as there's like a huge community around Phonegap and Cordova where there's lots of plugins, and right now you can't integrate with them. But they are actually, I think, probably the next release of XDK, they will be including the full Cordova API, which is awesome. And I still recommend using XDK if you just want to sort of get started with the whole mobile development. But just recognize that it's sort of limited, but it makes it really easy to get started and get a quick prototype going. Aside from that, anything you do for this, you can actually pretty easily port it to an actual Cordova project. I'm not going to go through the entire, like the whole process for creating a Cordova app, but there's a bit more of a learning curve. Everything's done via command line and stuff like that. You add your platforms that you want to build for individually. But like one of the benefits to that is there's lots of plugins that extend the entire platform, and you have access to doing native code. Like one of the things that I'm doing specifically with this app is I found this open source calendar plugin, but it doesn't provide all the data from the built-in calendars for Android that I needed. So I extended it. I did a couple pull requests for it too, so maybe it ended up in the main source by now. I haven't really checked recently. But that's a really nice feature to have, that, and you probably could do a native UI on it if you wanted to, but I haven't really messed around with that. The last thing is using Crosswalk. So if you're not familiar with Crosswalk, Crosswalk is a technology also built by Intel, where all it does is really embed Chromium into your application. And the big thing with that that's important is, like I mentioned earlier, pre 4.4, everything in built-in web views is really old and slow. And specifically, the device I have, it's Android 4.2. It's probably never going to get an operating system upgrade, just because if it's not a Google device, it probably won't. So the nice thing about this is I can just use Chromium, which lets me test in my browser really easy and do most of my development in my browser. So this is the view I usually use. As you can see, like, none of the calendar stuff is actually populated on here, and that's because it's only available like on Android specifically. I do have like fixtures in here, but I don't have them enabled right now. So if you're not aware, in Chrome, there's actually this little mobile button right here that allows you to do emulation. And you can set it to any device you want. You can emulate mobile, you can do touchscreen, and it gives you like the same thing as like a touch interface, which is really awesome for testing purposes. And that way you don't have to do it on the actual device. That's another problem with this device in particular. I actually can't hook it up to a computer, so I can't debug on it at all. But normally most devices you can. So one of the downsides to using Crosswalk, though, is it actually makes your like download size bigger. Like, it adds 20 megabytes to your download size and 50 megabytes to install size. Personally, for the performance increases you get, it's well worth it. You can ensure like good performance on pretty much any version of Android, which is awesome. There's also a bigger learning curve, since you actually the process for integrating it with your project is sort of a pain. Basically, you download the Crosswalk platform. I have it like unzipped right here. So you get like this framework directory, and basically the way it's designed is it's designed specifically for Cordova a lot of the time. Or I think you can do it regular, but I'm using Cordova. But you copy all their sources basically and overwrite all the built-in Cordova ones. And then what it does is it replaces every web view with the specific Chromium web view. That makes everything faster. But once you get it set up, like, it's really very easy to use. Actually, just have everything run in a build script. And again, since I can't debug specifically on my device, part of my build script is actually just copying it to Dropbox, and then I just launch it from Dropbox on my device, and it allows me to iterate really fast. As far as like the actual development of this application in particular, it's pretty straightforward CanJS app. One of the shortcomings to using Cordova is actually had to, there's probably some way around it, but I didn't feel like messing with it. I actually had to embed all my mustache templates into the HTML. I could also done it in a JavaScript file, but I prefer it here. Sort of annoying, but I mean, I didn't have much content in here to begin with. But basically, I dynamically populate all my data elsewhere, and then it's pretty straightforward. Mustache templates. I am going to, right now, the entire application, it's all read-only. I'm going to be doing more editing and stuff like that, and as I do that, all the stuff I'm going to be converting to Kant components, which are far more useful for that, since essentially everything is like a repetitive widget, like all over the place. So this is fine when it's read only, but it's not going to be efficient otherwise.
So Andy, are you just doing like Ajax requests? Not really doing any file I/O at this point?
I'll go through that in a second.
Okay.
But yeah, for the most part, it's Ajax requests. So this is sort of the main engine right here. I'm updating the clock every second. This is inefficient code right now, but I'm also updating the actual data every 15 minutes. And as far as that goes, one thing that's really important with like applications, especially if you want this running on a web browser, whenever you're updating stuff over time, use request animation frame. Like what that does is, if you're using set timeout and the application is in the background and stuff, it'll still run and like use CPU and battery and stuff. But request animation will essentially set a timeout that will fire the moment the tab or application becomes active again. Aside from that, this application is pretty straightforward. I'm going to hop into the data sources. So for weather, I'm actually using Weather Underground, which is an awesome service. It provides lots of information. The one place I'm not doing that, and actually for all these, I'm using JSONP, which is basically a way for doing cross-domain requests. The one exception for that is, so like I mentioned before, there's this like dust thing that's the pollen forecast. There's not really any publicly available APIs for that. So what I had to do was, since I don't want to run a web server on a different machine or something, I actually did it with Yahoo Pipes, where it grabs some website somewhere and then just extracts out all the data, so I actually get like a really simple JSON object, which I can then convert to something that's a bit more usable. And I use that to generate all the states of that. The next one is Wunderlist. So all of these lists are powered by Wunderlist behind the scenes, which if you don't know what that is, it's a to-do list for mobile devices. It has a web version as well. I'm going to pull it up on an Android thing. But this allows you to have like to-dos on the go without having to actually access the application that we're using. And they have like built-in syncing and all that stuff, so it just sort of like made it easier to get something up and working. If I was turning this into a commercial project later, I'd probably have to come up with some other way of doing this, but I don't, at least for now. So with this, Wunderlist actually doesn't have an official API. There is like, people have reverse engineered it. Like there's a Python API that I sort of use as inspiration, but even that doesn't really document a whole lot of it. So sort of got around that by actually inspecting what they send over time and sort of replicating that. Although, I mean, obviously use Wunderlist for most of your stuff. This is just sort of providing my simple editing that I needed in the app. But all this is simply, I mean, it's pretty straightforward, just REST requests to their server. As far as the calendar itself, this uses that Android plugin that I was mentioning before. There's also, like, that same plugin supports iOS as well. So you could theoretically build this for both platforms without any trouble. For this, though, I'm basically just looking at all events. I'm using a date span, essentially. And then, based on that, just displaying it in the app itself. All this stuff's pretty straightforward. If you pull up like a tutorial for using the calendar plugin, it's pretty straightforward. I think that's pretty much it for how to build a native web application, or native mobile.
I have a question. How big is that app now? Because you said that it's like using the separate Chromium ads. Like,
Let me check.
it seemed a little big for a mobile app. Or how big is a standard Phonegap application? I don't remember.
I honestly don't know what a standard one is. Let's see.
Probably a Phonegap application doesn't include Chromium.
Yeah. Normally, it doesn't include Chromium. This is actually only 18 megs, which honestly isn't that bad. You probably wouldn't want a device that doesn't have any space, but considering the performance increases you get, 18 megs is honestly no big deal.
And that's the package. Like this is a version though, right? That's what you download in the end.
Yeah, yeah. Like this, one of these APK files is what you're installing for Android.
Yeah, that's not too bad.
No. Well, I lost my Chrome window to stop screen sharing, but that's it for me.
Awesome. It's a great app.
Thanks.
Kind of looking forward to getting our hands on it as well when you're willing to share.
Yeah,
Yeah, like I
yeah.
said, at some point I might open source it. I haven't really decided yet.
I was going to say, let's make it
it's
official right now. Andy decided he's going to open source it for everybody. Thank you.
Everyone watching gets a copy.
Yep, exactly.
But only if you're watching right at this exact moment.
Okay, awesome. Any other questions for him, David or Matt?
It looks like there's a question from Patrick. On this, I'm actually using Zepto. I'm not sure if it matters which one I use, but I know Zepto's a bit lighter weight, so I went with Zepto for that. And it supports everything I need, which isn't a ton.
Cool. This was an awesome meetup, you guys. You know, just as a reminder to everybody, we do this every single Friday at the exact same time, 4 p.m. Eastern, 1 p.m. Pacific. And if you want to kind of keep up to speed with it, then just follow us on Twitter or Google+, and there's a couple other ways as well. We have a blog post about on CanJS.com, so feel free to check that out. And thank you to Andy and Josh, who's not here right now, and then to Matt and David for commentating. So awesome. I'll see everybody next week.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks.
Good. Bye.